From the night the US voted in its reality TV president, there were those who thought this moment inevitable. While few could predict Nancy Pelosi would use quite so many pens to sign the articles of impeachment, the custom to dole them out as mementos, some of Donald Trump's detractors suspected it would just be a matter of time. Many supporters, too, wondered if this moment would come when those articles would be carried by hand in a choreographed procession to the Senate, although they predicted it would happen because their man would be unfairly targeted, the victim of a witch hunt. But this season of the Trump reality saga had a big last-minute twist.
That we were there on behalf of the President of the United States.
That you were there to speak on President Trump's behalf.
Correct, exactly. Those exact words.
On the eve of only the third impeachment trial in US history, a bombshell interview. This man, Lev Parnas, turned to primetime to blow up the president's defense.
What do you think is the main inaccuracy or the main lie that's being told that you feel like you can correct?
That the president didn't know what was going on. President Trump knew exactly what was going on. He was aware of all of my movements. I wouldn't do anything without the consent of Rudy Giuliani or the president.
Lev Parnas is under indictment for campaign finance violations, which is why the White House says he's not credible. But he was the man hired by the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. He says to help persuade Ukraine's President Zelensky to dig up dirt on Trump's political rival, Joe Biden. But Trump has insisted his actions were only ever about one thing.
I'm only interested in corruption. Everything to me is about corruption. We're investigating corruption.
Are you saying the president was aware that you and Mr. Giuliani were working on this effort in Ukraine to basically try to hurt Joe Biden's political career? He knew about that?
Yeah, well, it was all about Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and it was never about corruption.
The man sitting next to Mr. Parnas during his interview with MSNBC is his lawyer, who released this video on Twitter a few days ago. In October, though, President Trump denied knowing either Parnas or his associate, Igor Fruman.
I don't know those gentlemen. Now, it's possible I have a picture with them because I have a picture with everybody. I don't know them. I don't know about them. I don't know what they do.
He lied. I mean, we're not friends. I mean, when you say friends, I mean, me and him didn't watch football games together. We didn't eat hot dogs. But he knew exactly who we were. He knew exactly who I was, especially because I interacted with him at a lot of events.
There's no doubt the Parnas revelations will raise the stakes, though incredibly there were Republican senators this morning who said they hadn't even heard them. Can I grab one very quickly? Just what do you make of the revelations this morning?
I haven't heard any revelations.
From Lev Parnas? What do you make of these revelations from Lev Parnas this morning? How damaging are they to the president?
Well, I haven't seen all the materials that have been turned over.
He says the president knew exactly what was going on.
Right. I haven't seen all the materials that have been turned over, and I haven't really seen the interview.
How have you reacted to this morning?
Until I hear the full story, and the president has changed his opinion.
The Democrats say the Parnas allegations need to be considered.
We're obviously seeing more from Mr. Parnas and others that I think have to be made part of the record. How we do that remains to be seen.
I'm the dean of the Senate, and I've never seen any president, Republican or Democrat, ever even contemplate doing something like this.
The managers on the part of the House of Representatives are present and ready to present the articles of impeachment.
In the past few hours, the articles were formally read in the Senate.
Article 1, abuse of power. Article 2, obstruction of Congress.
Next, senators on both sides must take an oath of impartiality. But ponder on this. The Senate's top Republican has already said on national TV he is not impartial, and he'll take his cues during the trial from the White House. A couple of important developments to mention here. The federal watchdog, the Government Accountability Office, has said today that the White House, ergo President Trump, violated federal law when it withheld that military aid, that $400 million worth to Ukraine, because the aid was agreed and signed off by Congress. It said the president, therefore, had no right to appropriate those funds for what they called policy reasons. The money was, of course, later released to Ukraine, but only after the scandal broke. The Democrats today immediately seizing on that news as evidence that the White House and President Trump broke the law. The White House, though, still continuing to insist that holding those funds were both appropriate, it said, and necessary. Either way, it's certainly not good news on the day that the president's trial kicks off formally in the Senate. I think you can see some pictures here of senators waiting for the swearing-in ceremony to begin. They will, of course, act as jurors during that trial. More bad news today. Obviously, you saw there in my piece those ugly revelations from Lev Parnas. Now, Republicans have said that those allegations need to be validated, but certainly there's no doubt that they will put pressure on the Republicans to include witnesses during the trial, something that the Republicans have so far strongly resisted. And if they do include witnesses, and if there are new, fresh, damning allegations, that fresh evidence comes out, then that could up the stakes quite considerably for President Trump.
Siobhan Kennedy on Capitol Hill. Well, earlier I spoke to David Frum, former speechwriter for President George W. Bush and author of Transpocracy, The Corruption of the American Republic. I began by asking him about the significance of Lev Parnas' comments.
The impact of the Parnas testimony is to deliver a body blow warning to Republicans in the Senate that there is a lot of information out there about what President Trump did to try to defame his political opponent by blackmailing the government of Ukraine. The Trump administration has been engaged in an attempt to cover up by refusing to provide evidence, by refusing to allow people to testify. But it's a huge pile of dirt. It's not that big a carpet. And every once in a while you get these gusts that show how much dirt is under the carpet. Parnas reminded us all of that. How reliable is Parnas? Not very. That's one of the things that happens in these Trump inquiries. You know, the Trump people will say, you know, he's a liar, he's a hoodlum, and all of that is true because, after all, he is an associate of Donald Trump's. The Trump defense so often says, "How can you believe this witness? How can you believe Donald Trump's long-term personal lawyer? How can you believe his these associates of his? After all, they worked for Donald Trump. They must be criminals and liars." The problem is there aren't very many honest people who work for Donald Trump. So the evidence you're going to get from his associates comes from people with these impairments. But remember, everything that Parnas is saying so far has been backed up by contemporaneous textual evidence.
You mean there are real texts which can't really be challenged?
One of the claims that Donald Trump makes, for example, is that perhaps Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York, Donald Trump's personal lawyer, was off on some frolic and diversion of his own. Well, Parnas has provided us with a letter from Rudy Giuliani to the president of Ukraine in which Rudy Giuliani says, "I'm acting for President Trump. I'm acting in his personal capacity. This is not a favor on behalf of the United States. And I understand that you will find my request may be unusual." So the elements of the unusualness of the demand are all there.
We've made the assumption that the impeachment, which has come through from the Congress, is politically motivated and can be escaped by the fact that there is a majority for the Republicans in the Senate. But is this so easily escaped?
Look, I don't think there's, to this day, any real doubt that the Republicans in the Senate will vote to acquit the president. After all, it takes a two-thirds majority to convict, to impeach and remove a president, and that's probably not available. But what happens with each passing day is the political price to those Republicans rises. What happens to them if they vote not just to acquit, but to cover up, to have a fake trial, not hear evidence? What happens to them? That is a calculation they all have to make.
So the political damage to them in terms of honesty is worse than any question of the loyalty that's implied by voting in the Senate against the impeachment.
Donald Trump is probably going to lose the 2020 election. He has been consistently the most unpopular first-term president in the history of polling. And as people in Britain know, when a candidate is unpopular, they tend to lose. So the question, however, has been, most people assume Donald Trump may lose in 2020, but the Republican hold on the Senate is solid. But if the impeachment begins to show up lots and lots of dirt, if the Republicans look like they are complicit with Donald Trump in concealing, if they refuse to give a fair hearing to what is obviously important evidence, the question then becomes, is Republican control of the Senate in 2020 at risk as well?
But it's fascinating that you say that Mr. Trump's going to lose because, I mean, the Democrats are really not even easily finding somebody to challenge him. And at the same time, there is this incredibly populous sort of, I mean, it is popularity that is keeping him so happily in the White House.
I didn't say he will lose. I said he probably will lose. Donald Trump is the only president, the only first-term president in the history of polling, never once to have achieved 50% approval in any credible poll. He usually is in the middle 40s. He's got a lot of wind in his face, and there's a lot of effort to deny that because a lot of Donald Trump's secret of his career to date has been telling people that he's succeeding even when he's failing.
David Frum, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
And right now you can see senators coming in one by one to sign in effectively as members of the jury.